for today is Genesis 18, 1 through 15. The Lord appeared to Abraham at the oaks of Mamre while he sat at the entrance of his tent in the day's heat. He looked up and suddenly saw 3 men standing near him. As soon as he saw them, he ran from his tent entrance to greet them and bowed deeply. He said, "Sirs, if you would be so kind, don't just pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought so you may wash your feet and refresh yourselves under the tree. Let me offer you a little bread so you will be stronger, and after that you may leave your servant and go on your way, since you have visited your servant." They responded, "Fine, do just as you have said." So Abraham hurried to Sarah at his tent and said, "Hurry, knead 3 seahs of the finest flour and make some baked goods." Abraham ran to the cattle, took a healthy young calf, and gave it to the young servant, who prepared it quickly. Then Abraham took butter, milk, and the calf that had been prepared, put the food in front of them, and stood under the tree near them as they ate. They said to him, "Where's your wife Sarah?" And he said, "Right here in the tent." Then one of the men said, "I will definitely return to you about this time next year. Then your wife Sarah will have a son." Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were both very old. Sarah was no longer menstruating, so Sarah laughed to herself, thinking, "I'm no longer able to have children, and my husband's old." The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Me give birth at my age'? Is anything too difficult for the Lord? When I return to you about this time next year, Sarah will have a son." Sarah lied and said, "I didn't laugh," because she was frightened. But he said, "No, you laughed." Okay, now the Gloria.
Thank you for having me today. I am the youth director at Brook United Methodist Church, so I'm used to mostly sharing messages with elementary and middle school students. But Pastor Matt has been nudging me to fill in a few times a year for him the past couple of years. And Pastor Roberta found out about this at a Bible study we were all attending together. And so now here I am today. My husband, Mike, and I live on the family farm with our 3 kids. My oldest, Emma, is in 6th grade, Owen is in 4th grade, and Aiden is in 1st grade. And once all 3 kids were in school full-time, Mike was very eager to get me out into the field, helping him during harvest. And each year it seems that he teaches me just one more thing to add to my repertoire of harvest skills. So I want you to imagine a picture of a combine and grain cart driving through the field next to each other during harvest, and the caption to the picture says, "No one believes in a wife as much as a husband who doesn't have anyone to help him." This is what popped up on my Instagram feed day one of harvest this year. I must have been complaining about harvest enough that even my phone had caught on. I was panicking about driving semis this year. My husband was kind enough to purchase 2 automatic semis so that I could help with hauling the grain to our bin site. I was so annoyed last January when I was waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to sleep because I was worried about driving semis. Harvest was still 8 months away. I was playing and replaying all these scenes in my head about not turning wide enough and going into the ditch, or turning at a corner only to find another large piece of equipment or any sort of moving vehicle in my way. I remember saying prayers like, "Okay, God, clearly I am freaking out here. Please just send someone our way that Mike cannot pass up. Like, just drop this person right in front of him, make it really clear for him to hire this other person so I don't have to do this." Well, fast forward to the end of September, and there I was, sitting in a semi on the side of the road thinking, how did I get here? How is this my life right now? What is happening? When I was a student at St. Joseph's College in Rensselaer, I went to a career fair once with a group of other students. I'm guessing I was probably a junior and was starting to think about the future after college. I don't remember all the particular details. I'm not sure if all the people presenting were all St. Joe alumni or not. But what I do remember is that every single person who spoke about their career that day had one thing in common. Their degree was in one thing, and they ended up in a career that wasn't a part of their plan. They had started on one path and ended up in another path. And I remember being intrigued by that and wondering about where I would be 15 to 20 years after college. Surely I would still be teaching with my teaching degree. So I started playing my life back, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together that got me to that moment of sitting in a semi on the first day of harvest at the end of September 2025. And I could piece it together and see how one thing led to another, but I still had this question of, why me though? This is crazy. This was not something I had thought I would ever be doing in my lifetime. Along with the stress of harvest, the start of the new school year was more stressful than I would have liked. Sports activities were in full swing, and I had a to-do list a mile long. I was feeling very overwhelmed and wondering how I was going to survive the next 6 weeks or so. I remembered doing a Beth Moore Bible study 4 or 5 years ago that really helped me center myself on the place I was in that moment, and focus on the areas that God wanted me to focus on. I couldn't remember exactly which Bible study it was, but I started looking through my old books and thought if I saw it, it would jump out at me. I did find a Beth Moore Bible study that I had done in the past, but I'm not sure it's the one I had in mind. But it's the only one I could find, so I chose to try it anyway. Something I learned to like about driving semis early on was that you get a little more downtime in between loads than you do in the grain cart. So I would take this Bible study book with me each morning while I was waiting to get filled up. And I came across the story of Abraham and Sarah, particularly the part where God and 2 divine beings come to visit Abraham. Abraham is outside with them while Sarah is inside the tent preparing a meal for their guests. One of the divine beings said to Abraham, "I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son." Well, Sarah, in her old age, overheard this conversation happening while in the tent and laughed quietly to herself, like, what a ridiculous notion. She thought to herself, Abraham and I are too old to have children now, and so she laughed it off. She got a pretty good chuckle out of the absurdity of such a thing. And the question to the reader at this point in the study was, what has God done for you that, had someone said it to you years ago, you would have laughed? And here I am, sitting in my semi, reading this part of my study, and I laugh out loud. My response was, everything I'm doing right now, God. 5 years ago, if someone told me I'd be able to drive the grain cart, drive a semi, manage the bin side a little bit, and be a regular person that my husband relies on for harvest, I would have most definitely laughed. I wonder if you can relate to this a little. Maybe you have a time where you can remember laughing at the idea of doing something, and then several years down the road, you are in fact doing that thing. Maybe it's something from the past, or maybe it's your life right now. Well, I was intrigued by this idea of laughable circumstances, and I started thinking about other stories from the Bible and wondered who else might have had a similar response. The first person I thought about was Gideon. What if 5 years earlier, God had come to Gideon and said, Gideon, I'm going to make you a leader of an army of only 300 men, and you're going to defeat an army of thousands at night while blowing horns, lighting torches, and breaking pots. I think Gideon would have laughed and thought, yeah, right, that's not going to happen. Or the story of David, the unlikely youngest of 8 sons, scrawniest kid of the family, defeats a giant with a stone in his slingshot. When David says he'll go fight the giant, you can almost hear the laugh in Saul's response. Don't be ridiculous. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. Or the story of Jonah. What if God came to Jonah 5 years earlier and said, Jonah, one day I'm going to ask you to go to Nineveh, and you're going to tell me no. You're going to travel in the opposite direction, and I'm going to have to get your attention by making you fall out of your boat, and then a whale will swallow you up, where you will sit for several days before deciding that you should just go where I send you. I think Jonah would have laughed and also thought, yeah, right, that's not going to happen. Or the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth. Gabriel comes to Zechariah while he's in the sanctuary and says, don't be afraid, Zechariah. God has heard your prayer. Your wife Elizabeth will give you a son, and you are to name him John. Gabriel continues to tell Zechariah a very specific list of things that will happen because of John, to which Zechariah responds with, and maybe smirks a little, how can I be sure this will happen? I am an old man now, and my wife is also well along in years. We could say the same thing about Mary and Joseph. What would Mary and her parents have done if a messenger had come to them 5 years earlier and said, you are going to conceive a child by the Holy Spirit, and this child will save the world? It's possible that 5 years before that, Mary was only 8 to 10 years old, which would have added to the impossibility and unlikeliness and absurdity of the situation that they probably would have laughed about it. Or in the book of John, when Philip has been called by Jesus to follow him, and Philip goes to find Nathanael. Philip says, we have found the very person Moses and the prophets wrote about. His name is Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth. And Nathanael's response is, Nazareth? Can anything good come from Nazareth? I can imagine there might have been a little smirking happening there too. The whole Bible is full of impossible, unlikely stories that we could go on and on and on with the majority, if not all, of the stories of the Bible and see how there could have been a laughable response in one way or another. God's response to these laughable situations is not always the same, but he never condemned any of these people. He never said, oh, they laughed, or, oh, they don't believe, now I have to go find someone else. He never does that. He might make them mute, or challenge their lack of faith with a question, or take their leadership role away for a time, but the earth did not quake and swallow them whole. He confronted them, but did not condemn them. Let's go back to Sarah and Abraham. Why did God point out the issue of Sarah's laughter, besides the obvious issue of her lack of faith? Could it be that he wanted the laughter to be something she thought of again and again? Did God want the older couple to think of this moment and replay it in their minds for the next 12 months, or for as long as they lived on earth? God told Abraham to name the child Isaac, which means he laughed. This memory would not be a sour reminder of an old couple's doubt. It would be a sweet reminder of God's faithfulness. If you read on in Genesis chapter 21, verses 1 through 7, we see that God kept his word and did exactly what he said he would do. Sarah became pregnant, gave birth to a son, and named him Isaac. And verse 6 is my favorite. Sarah declared, God has brought me laughter. All who hear about this will laugh with me. It's astounding, right? It's a laughter of great joy and an unbelievable event. But it happened. God is faithful. When we look further at the stories I mentioned earlier, we can see God's faithfulness in all of them. The story of Gideon, David, Jonah, Zechariah and Elizabeth, Mary and Joseph, Nathaniel, and so many more. God did exactly what he said he would do, because God is faithful. When I was sitting in my semi, wondering how I got to this place in my life, God gently reminded me that I asked for this. He took me to a memory from early on in our marriage when I had prayed for God to show me how I could have a place in the family farm. I knew I needed to be patient, and the opportunity would present itself. Here's a couple of things about that, though. First, I was way more ambitious and excited about learning new skills at the age of 27 than I am now at the age of 40. And second, when I learned how to do the bookkeeping for the farm, I thought, this is it. I have found my place in the family farm business, and I was good with that. I thought then that my prayer was answered. Thank you, God, for your faithfulness. I had no idea that he wasn't done yet. Also, God did answer my more immediate prayer at the time of sending someone to help us during harvest that we couldn't pass up. It's just that I still had to drive the semi some too, which tells me that God is not letting me get out of this role yet. I think in an odd way, God likes it a little bit when our faith is weak and we ask a lot of questions. It's an opportunity for us to see his faithfulness and grow in our relationship with him. During harvest, my prayer life increased significantly. I was in conversation a lot more with God. Sometimes it was joyful and thankful conversation, praising God, but a lot of that time it wasn't. Some of it was out of anger or frustration. Some of it was with tears. Some of it was asking for forgiveness for the mean thoughts I had going through my head about the guy in the combine, which was my husband. And here's the thing. I'm still a little salty about the idea of driving semis again during harvest this year and being one of the main harvest helpers. But somehow, for some reason, this is what God is doing for me right now. I don't understand it completely. I'm still asking why sometimes. But despite all of that, I have seen God's faithfulness in it. And because of that, because I have experienced God's faithfulness, because I know it's something that is possible to happen to me, and not just something I read about happening to others, going forward, I have hope that I will continue to see his faithfulness again. Just because I'm up here today sharing this part of my story with you, what I've experienced and witnessed, doesn't make me more special than you. I mean, I could also add this to my list of laughable things. Standing up in front of you giving a message. I'm pretty sure I did laugh at my pastor when he first asked me to fill in for him a couple years ago. And now, here I am sharing a message with you, my first church away from my home church. In my longing, frustration, stress, and question asking, I stumbled upon all of this. Or maybe I was led, but to me, it felt like stumbling. But in hindsight, maybe I was intentionally led by God through his Spirit. But all I did was reach out to him, broken and confused, with questions of whys and hows and whens, and from there things slowly took place. Sometimes our questions are answered easily and quickly. Sometimes it takes years for the answers to appear. My favorite thing about God being all-knowing is that I don't have to hide from him. There's no point in holding back what I'm really thinking or feeling because he already knows it. So I can just let it all out and give it to him in its rawest form. My point is, you don't have to be special to have this. You don't have to be a certain kind of Christian. You don't have to be in the right time of your life. You don't have to do workbook Bible studies. You don't have to pray a certain way or go to church for a certain amount of time. You just have to be you, where you are right now, looking for answers beyond what you can see, beyond what this world has to offer. And God will meet you there in whatever way works for you. He will show up when you least expect it in a way that you didn't expect, but he knows you. So he knows how to get your attention. And later, as you reflect on it, you might laugh. Just like with Sarah, that laugh will stick with you so that you can remember God's faithfulness for all time. Again, if we look further at the stories I mentioned earlier, we not only see God's faithfulness in all of them, but we also see a period of waiting that happened first. In the period of waiting, there was growing, learning, trust building, forgiving, mercy, grace, guidance, love. Life is a series of seasons or moments in which we are waiting, but it's what happens in the waiting that's important. In the waiting is where God does his best work in us. In the waiting is where our faith gets a little shaky. We ask some questions, we do some searching of answers, and then grow further in our faith. In the waiting is where our relationship with God deepens. In the waiting is where we learn to forgive and be forgiven. I believe it's in the waiting where we see God's faithfulness, where we look for the reassurance of his faithfulness from the past to give us hope for the future. And so this week, I encourage you to reflect on this. What has God done for you that, had someone said it to you years ago, you would have laughed? Or maybe someone actually did suggest it and you did laugh. In your season of life right now, where are you waiting? What are you waiting for? And what is God trying to teach you in the waiting? Think about these questions and talk about it with God and see where the conversation leads you. I hope it leads you to a place where you can reminisce with God and see his faithfulness, and then walk into the next season of waiting with him, not alone, but with him. He's always there, never condemning, but always with us as we struggle and grow through the waiting. God is faithful.